The boardroom fell silent as laughter erupted from the head of the table. Mr. Stone, the untouchable CO, leaned back in his leather chair, smirking at the man in a faded janitor's uniform holding a mop. "Tell me, Henry, do you polish floors better than you polish excuses?" Some executives chuckled nervously. Others avoided eye contact. Henry didn't flinch. His eyes swept the room once, meeting the gaze of every single person present, before calmly setting the mop aside. Mr. Stone rose, towering over him. "Careful, or you'll scrub your way right out of this building." Henry's voice was steady, almost too calm. "Careful, Mr. Stone, you might be talking to your new boss." The words hung in the air like a sudden crack of thunder. Several jaws dropped. The CEO's smirk faltered. The room, moments ago alive with arrogance, froze in stunned silence. What did he just say? The silence in the boardroom lingered, but the story had begun long before this moment. Just 3 days earlier, the same floor had echoed with Mr. Stone's voice. Not in negotiation, not in leadership, but in public scolding. "Johnson, your numbers are a disgrace. Fire half your team if you have to." He barked at a trembling department head. His office door was a revolving gate for nervous employees, each leaving more deflated than they'd entered. In the hallway, Henry pushed his cleaning cart with the same quiet precision every night. His uniform was worn, his shoes dull from years of polish, but there was a strange order to everything he did. The spray bottles on his cart stood in exact height order. The mop head was washed and folded perfectly after each use. He never rushed, never dragged his feet. Every movement had intention, almost like muscle memory from a very different life. Most dismissed him with a nod, or more often, without noticing him at all, except for the few who overheard pieces of his late-night phone calls. "Move the shares to the secondary account." "No, don't trigger the public notice yet," he whispered once, tucking his phone away the second someone passed. To them, it sounded like another world, far removed from mops and brooms. Mr. Stone noticed none of it. To him, Henry was just another part of the furniture, useful only when invisible. That week, his arrogance had been in full bloom. He cut holiday bonuses for the janitorial staff, claiming luxuries don't suit low-skilled workers. When the office manager timidly suggested otherwise, Stone laughed. "People like that should be grateful we let them in the building." It was the same tone he used when a junior analyst, visibly nervous, pitched a groundbreaking idea. He tore it apart without even looking at the numbers, then later presented the same idea as his own in a meeting. Henry had watched it all with the patience of a man stacking dominoes. No one noticed how his gaze lingered on Stone's office door longer than anywhere else, or how his nightly route always ended near the boardroom. No one saw the way his eyes scanned documents carelessly left on the conference table. Not with curiosity, but with the familiarity of someone who understood exactly what he was reading. The staff liked him, though. He fixed the vending machine when it jammed, brought hot tea to the receptionist on cold nights, and remembered everyone's names. But he never said much about himself. When someone once joked, "You're too smart to be a janitor," he just smiled faintly and replied, "Smart enough to know when to wait." Now, that patience was about to pay off, and no one, especially Mr. Stone, had the slightest clue how close they were to a reckoning. The quarterly strategy meeting was in full swing, the long mahogany table crowded with department heads, investors, and a few carefully selected guests. Mr. Stone was in his element, prowling at the head of the table with the swagger of a man who believed himself untouchable. Charts flashed on the wall. Stock projections danced in the air, and every word out of his mouth dripped with self-satisfaction. Halfway through a boast about the company's record profits under his leadership, the door at the far end of the room opened quietly. Henry slipped in with his cart, head slightly bowed, careful not to disturb a meeting as he wheeled toward the far wall to polish the glass. Stone's voice stopped mid-sentence. A slow grin spread across his face, the kind that signaled trouble for whoever was in its path. Well, what's this?" The help decided to join the executive meeting. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. Henry straightened slightly, offering a small nod. "Just cleaning up, sir. I'll be out of your way." Stone stepped aside from the projector, gesturing broadly at him as though presenting a spectacle. Gentlemen, meet Henry, the man who keeps our floors shining brighter than our competition. Laughter, louder this time. Even some who found the jab tasteless let out a forced chuckle, not wanting to be the odd one out. Henry kept moving, his motions calm and deliberate. Stone wasn't finished. Tell me, Henry, when you're done sweeping floors, do you ever dream of sitting at this table, making the big decisions? The laughter swelled again. Henry paused, meeting Stone's eyes with a quiet steadiness. I think everyone should be prepared for big decisions. Sir, especially the ones that happen unexpectedly. A flicker of something unreadable passed over Stone's face, but he recovered with a smirk. Oh, and what big decision will you be making? Whether to mop left or right? More laughter. Henry simply placed a rag back on his cart, as if ending the conversation on his own terms. I've got an important meeting tomorrow morning, he said, almost casually. The words hung in the air for a second, meaningless to most, but just odd enough to stir a faint unease in those paying attention. Stone waved him off. Try not to be late. Wouldn't want to keep the other janitors waiting. More chuckles. Henry rolled his cart toward the exit, his face unreadable. Behind him, some executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. They couldn't quite say why, but the way he delivered that last line, it didn't sound like a man talking about a mop and bucket. The next day, the boardroom was fuller than usual. Stone had coincidentally scheduled an all-hands investor briefing right when Henry would be in the building. He'd made sure every department head, every senior manager, and even a few visiting partners were present. This wasn't about strategy. This was about sport. As the last slide of the presentation faded, Stone's voice rang out. Before we wrap up, I thought we'd have a little entertainment. A murmur ran through the room. He gestured toward the door. Henry, come on in. Don't be shy. Henry stepped in, pushing his cart as usual. Stone smiled like a magician about to reveal a trick. Tell everyone what you told me yesterday. Henry tilted his head slightly. I just said I had an important meeting this morning. And here you are, meeting the most important people in this company. Stone spread his arms to the table. Now, let's see if you're worth the floor space. The room stilled. Even those who normally enjoyed Stone's arrogance sensed this was more than a joke. Stone leaned in, voice low but carrying. I'll make you a bet. Prove to me, right now in front of everyone, that you have any skill, any ability that belongs in this room. If you fail, you're fired on the spot. A ripple of whispers traveled around the table. Henry's gaze didn't waver. And if I succeed? Stone smirked. If you succeed, name your reward. Anything within reason. He laughed as though the offer was absurd. Henry took a slow breath. Then, I like a junior analyst position. Lowest rung you've got. Stone blinked. The modest request disarmed him. Even drew a few confused looks from the board. That's it? No six-figure salary? No corner office? That's it, Henry said, his voice steady. Stone grinned. Perfect. This will be easier than I thought. He turned to the board. Gentlemen, let's see our janitor try to play in the big leagues. As Henry stepped toward the head of the table, his eyes drifted, just for a second, to the wall behind Stone's chair. A framed photograph caught his attention. Stone younger, shaking hands with a smiling woman in a tailored suit. Henry's jaw tightened. The woman's face was one he knew by heart. A face from before his life had been reduced to mop buckets and bleach. He looked away before anyone could notice. But for those who did see that brief flicker in his expression, it wasn't fear. It was something far more dangerous. Stone leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring the moment. All right, Henry, he said, tapping the table with one manicured finger. Let's test that brain of yours. You're always hanging around the boardroom. Let's see if you've actually learned anything. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a printout of a stalled merger proposal. A mess of figures, outdated projections, and scattered notes that had stumped the finance team for months. Find the flaw, Stone said. You've got 5 minutes. Or start packing your things. Henry glanced at the papers once, then twice. The chatter in the room hushed. He began making small notations with a pen, circling numbers, drawing connecting arrows. His movements were deliberate but quick, like a pianist gliding over familiar keys. 3 minutes later, he set the folder down. The valuation model is wrong. You're counting the same asset twice. Once you remove the duplicate entry, the acquisition becomes profitable. The silence was sharp, broken only by the shifting of chairs. One of the senior analysts leaned forward. "He's correct," she murmured, flipping through her own copy. "We missed it." Murmurs erupted. The CEO's smirk faltered just slightly. "That's beginner's luck," Stone said, voice tightening. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." Henry didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black phone. "May I make a quick call?" Stone laughed, waving his hand dismissively. "Sure, call your union rep while you still have a job." Henry dialed a number without hesitation. "Morning," confirmed the position. A voice crackled through the speaker. Confident, professional. "As of 9:30 a.m., you hold 38% of the company's outstanding shares." The transfer cleared. The words at the table, like a drop weight. Stone blinked. "What did you just say?" Henry ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "That's part of my other work. I invest carefully, strategically, and over the past year, I've been investing in one company in particular." Stone straightened in his chair, forcing a laugh. "So what? A few shares don't mean anything. You still mop floors here." Henry's voice stayed calm. "True, for now." The board members shifted uneasily. They weren't used to seeing their CEO rattled. Stone tried to wave it off. "Even if that's true, which I doubt, you're still my employee. Don't forget that." Henry met his eyes evenly. "We'll see how long that lasts." The tension in the room thickened. What had started as a harmless bit of public humiliation was turning into something else entirely. And though most couldn't see the full picture yet, they could feel it. Something under the surface was shifting, and it wasn't in the CEO's favor. Stone leaned forward, elbows on the table, forcing a strained chuckle. "All right, Henry, let's pretend for a moment you actually own some stock. You still answer to me. That's how this works." Henry stepped closer, resting his hands lightly on the table. "Actually, that's not how it works at all." He turned, addressing the room instead of the man at the head of it. "Over the last 11 months, I've quietly acquired this company's publicly traded shares. At first, a fraction of a percent here and there. Then, larger blocks whenever the market dipped. And every time this company made a questionable decision that drove the stock down, I bought more." The murmuring grew louder. Stone's jaw clenched. Henry's tone stayed measured, deliberate. "As of this morning, I own 42%. of Meridian Global's outstanding shares, making me the single largest shareholder." The words slammed into the boardroom like a gavel. Several executives exchanged wide-eyed glances. One or two actually straightened in their seats, as though instinctively recognizing a shift in hierarchy. Stone scoffed, but it sounded thin. "Even if that's true, it doesn't make you CEO. The board decides that." Henry smiled faintly. "And the board answers to its majority shareholder." He let the words sink in, which as of this morning is me. A ripple of disbelief rolled through the room. One of the investors on the far side of the table leaned toward another and whispered, "He's right. With that stake, he can call for a leadership vote anytime." Stone heard it. His face tightened. "Don't be ridiculous." Stone snapped. "You're a janitor. You've been here for what, 2 years? You're nothing without this company." Henry's voice sharpened, the first real edge in it all morning. "And you're nothing without its shareholders. Which means, as of now, you're nothing without me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Stone's gaze darted to the faces around the table, but instead of the loyal nods he was used to, he found uncertainty and, in a few eyes, something far worse: respect for Henry. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "This is absurd. You think you can walk in here with a mop in one hand and a few papers in the other and take my company?" Henry didn't flinch. "Not think, Mr. Stone. No." Henry didn't look at Stone when he spoke next. His eyes drifted to the photo on the wall. the one of Stone's shaking hands with a young woman in a tailored suit. 2 years ago, Henry began quietly. She walked into this building for an interview. Her name was Lena Walker. Brilliant. MBA from Wharton. Spoke 3 languages. She had everything your company claimed to value. Stone's face stiffened. He knew the name. She was told she wasn't the right cultural fit. Henry continued. In other words, she didn't look like the rest of you. You dismissed her in 10 minutes without even opening her portfolio. The room was silent now. Even the faint hum of the projector seemed louder. She was my wife, Henry said, his voice tightening for the first time. And that rejection didn't just close the door. It crushed her. She spent the next year applying to dozens of firms, always being told she wasn't what they were looking for. He drew a slow breath. She died in a car accident, coming home from yet another interview. In her purse was a rejection letter from this company. A few of the executives shifted uncomfortably, eyes down. Stone swallowed hard but said nothing. That's when I made a decision, Henry said. I wasn't going to shout outside your gates. I was going to walk through them. I'd mop your floors, polish your tables, and listen. And I'd buy this company piece by piece until the day I could stand in this room and make sure what happened to her never happens again. His voice dropped into a calm finality. Real power isn't in taking opportunity away. It's in giving it. The boardroom door swung open as Henry, now addressed as Mr. Walker, signed the final policy change. Effective immediately. Blind hiring processes, fair wage adjustments, and leadership mentorship for underrepresented staff. Stone stood frozen by the doorway, clutching the box of his personal items. No one met his eyes as he slipped out, head low. The echo of his footsteps faded into the hall. Henry looked around the room. The walls you build to keep others down, he said, might just become your own prison. The camera pulled back, sunlight spilling into the office as hope filled the air. Narrator. If you believe in justice, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right, subscribe, and let's build more stories like this together.